Greetings and welcome to the fantastic films of Vincent Price. I'm Dr. Gangrene, Nashville horror host, and I'll be your guide through this series where we'll be taking a chronological look at the horror, sci-fi, mystery, and fantasy films of the one and only Merchant of Menace, Vincent Price, as well as any other films or projects that I just feel like spotlighting, such as his appearance on the Brady Bunch.
If I can't get rid of them one way, I'll get rid of them another.
Or his 1974 hosting of the Horror Hall of Fame.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vincent Price, and welcome to my world.
Many times over the years, I've been asked what's my favorite horror movie, and my stock answer always is anything with Vincent Price in it. Vincent had that certain something about him, an air that just seemed to raise the quality of the film by his very presence. Not to mention that voice, unmistakable, menacing, and thoroughly mesmerizing.
If a god of love and life ever did exist, he is long since dead. Someone, something rules in his place.
Vincent was the first star that I remember recognizing as a kid. Not just a horror star, mind you. I'm talking a film star. Movies like House on Haunted Hill and The Fly made an indelible impression on me as a kid. In fact, his performance in House on Haunted Hill was one of my main influences on becoming a TV horror host.
Good evening. I'm your host, Frederick Lauren. Since we're all strangers to each other, let's get acquainted with a drink, shall we?
Last year, the Belcourt Theater, Nashville's art house theater and a true Nashville treasure, screened a series of Vincent Price films in 35mm, and it was a real treat to see those on the big screen. For the Vincentennial celebration, which was a celebration of Vincent Price's 100th birthday anniversary, I did 100 posts on my blog about Price, so I guess it's safe to say I'm a fan. Vincent Leonard Price was born May 27, 1911 in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from Yale University in 1933, and while working on a master's degree in London, he began acting in theater. He landed the lead role in the play Victoria Regina in 1936, performing in London for several months before traveling back to America to perform on Broadway. There he quickly caught the attention of Hollywood and was offered a contract by Universal Studios in 1938. His debut film was the 1938 screwball comedy Service Deluxe, opposite leading lady Constance Bennett. In it, Price plays Robert Wade, a young inventor traveling to New York to sell his plans for an innovative new kind of tractor. Constance Bennett plays Helen Murphy, owner of the Dorothy Madison Company, a kind of do-it-all service for bumbling males, offering advice and help with everything from wedding planning to hangover remedies. She's spunky, headstrong, and completely overworked.
You hear? I say, do you hear?
He wants to know if I hear. Yes, Mr. Wade. I'll leave at once. Oh, no trouble at all. Thank you. I wish I'd never had a client. I wish I'd never started this service. I wish I was in a padded cell 1,000 miles from a telephone. Oh, if I could only have a nervous breakdown.
Well, you're doing fine.
She's also fed up with needy, insecure men.
If I ever met anyone with a mind of his own, I'd faint of sheer rapture. If I ever met a man who could take care of himself, I'd die of delight. I'm so sick of running other people's lives for them that I'd welcome a caveman who'd knock me over the head and drag me over the hair.
Enter Wade, tall, handsome, and confident almost to the point of not caring. The two meet, and Helen is completely swept away. Wade is unlike any man she's met.
Oh, excuse me.
Say, what's the big idea?
Were you talking to me?
Look. Just look. That's all I want you to do.
Is that your hat?
That was my hat. You knocked it off with that thing.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Oh.
Well, I guess there's only one thing for me to do.
Well, that's a great help.
But doesn't it make us even?
Even? Mine was an original Lily Lachey from Paris.
Well, mine was an original Nobby shop from Schenectady.
Oh.
You know, it's amazing that Price was cast in the lead role in his first film right out of the gate. No supporting parts or bit roles for him. No, he's the leading man in his very first film. Now, he's not quite doing the Vincent Price mannerisms and voice that we would become accustomed to so well in later years, and he plays it straight for the most part. But the Vincent we know and love does surface just for a moment late in the film in this scene where he's trying to convince a young girl to leave him alone so he can get back to work.
I think there's something you ought to know about me. When people interrupt me while I'm working, a strange thing happens to me. First I see spots before my eyes, then I hear a rushing in my ears, then a roaring, then I brain the nearest person with this.
Oh, Bob, what's the matter with you? Well, how did you ever get like this?
It's inherited. There's always been insanity in my family. Sometimes my spells last only a minute. Sometimes they last a day. Sometime I'm afraid they're going to go on forever!
Service to Luxe is a typical Hollywood romantic comedy of its time. It's the old formula of two unlikely lovers who fall for one another despite all odds. There are several quirky characters thrown into the mix, as well as some zany situations, but the end result and requisite happy ending is never in question. Vincent even gets an opportunity to sing in this one, albeit briefly, as he playfully serenades Helen with a commercial jingle while dining one evening.
Sounds like a bad Spanish song.
Velrita, Velrita, oh how can I meet her?
You know, people have been hung for less than that.
She had such small feet, I never could beat her.
The film does tend to be a bit chauvinistic in places, as illustrated so well in this final scene where Helen decides to give up her busy career and life she's built for the man of her dreams.
Now, wait a minute. So I'm the goat around here, am I? Well, not on your life. I've tried on this monkey suit 11 times, and I'm going to use it. See, I'm going to get married. It's up to you. Get me a bride. Here's your chance to prove how great your medicine service is.
Hang the medicine service!
Say that again and smile.
Hang the medicine service.
Wade service from now on?
Yes, boss.
Indeed, but you know, I think that's as much this film being a product of its time as anything else. Service to Luxe is a pretty typical quirky romance, unremarkable other than being Price's first film. Now, the movie was directed by Roland V. Lee, who would go on the following year to make Son of Frankenstein, as well as Tower of London, where he would once again be teamed with Price. Next up for Vincent was the 1939 movie The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, a costume period piece that would place Price in the presence of some of the biggest stars of the day, Olivia de Havilland, Bette Davis, and Errol Flynn. It was a far cry from the quirky comedy he'd made the year before. This was an epic film, a cast of thousands type tale, shot in color with major studio backing. It concerns the on-again, off-again love affair with Queen Elizabeth I, played by Bette Davis, and the Earl of Essex, Robert Devereux, played by Errol Flynn. In it, Price plays the role of Sir Walter Raleigh, a foil for Flynn and rival for the Queen's attention. There is one memorable scene where Essex confronts Raleigh and tweaks him over the fancy silver armor he's wearing in the castle, but otherwise, Price has little to do in this picture. It was a learning experience for Vincent, however, dealing with Hollywood egos and a shooting atmosphere that was full of tension. As it is well documented, leading stars Bette Davis and Errol Flynn didn't get along, and Davis, in fact, objected to Flynn's casting as the lead. Vincent's next picture would reunite him with director Roland V. Lee, with whom Price had worked previously the year before on Service to Luxe. Tower of London from 1939 is a milestone in the career of Price, as it teamed him with horror legends Boris Karloff and Basil Rathbone, both of whom Price would go on to work again in the future, both separately and together. Tower of London is another costume period piece starring Basil Rathbone as Richard III, the Duke of Gloucester. Richard is sixth in line to the crown of England, but decides to take a shortcut to the throne: murder. He keeps a diorama in his private chamber with miniature figurines of each person who stands in his way, and as each is eliminated, he tosses their figure into the fire. Physically inferior, deformed at birth with a hunchback, Richard has enlisted the aid of the castle's club-footed executioner Mord, played by Boris Karloff, as his strong-armed compatriot. Together they eliminate those standing in Richard's path one by one, including Richard's own brother Clarence, played by Price. In one of the best scenes of the movie, Clarence has a drinking contest with Richard, quaffing mug after mug of wine, Vincent laughing madly throughout.
I've won!
It is a scene reminiscent of one Vincent would play again 23 years later in Tales of Terror, opposite Peter Lorre, another drinking contest that time played for laughs.
It all started at the Vintners Convention, where the lover of wine met the professional wine taster.
In Tower of London, the drinking contest ends badly for Price, however, with Richard and Mord unceremoniously dumping him headfirst into a giant cask of Malmsey wine, drowning him.
Ask for Momsey.
This was, by the way, Vincent's very first death scene. Karloff steals the show in Tower, particularly while stomping around the dungeon showing off his various instruments of torture. His makeup is nothing short of magnificent, designed by the one and only Jack Pierce, with whom Karloff was very familiar, having worked with him on 9 films up to that point, including Son of Frankenstein, also directed by Roland V. Lee, earlier that year. This film has kind of fallen between the cracks, all but forgotten by the general public nowadays, but classic horror fans should seek it out, if only for Karloff's menacing role as Mord. Basil is terrific as the scheming, backstabbing Richard as well, and Price's death scene alone is worth watching, especially as he's done in by 2 horror legends. Tower of London would be remade in 1962 by director Roger Corman, this time featuring Price in the lead role of Richard. You know, many people speculate on which film is the first horror film of Price's career, and for my money, it's Tower of London. Even though it's a loosely based historical drama, it's still ripe with dark horror imagery, including hangings, torture, even small children being killed. The presence of Rathbone and Karloff just served to further cement this one in the horror field for me. Next up for Vincent after Tower of London was The Invisible Man Returns in 1940, a sequel to the original 1933 film The Invisible Man. This film picks up 9 years after the events of the original. In it, Vincent plays Jeffrey Radcliffe, a man wrongly accused of his brother's murder and imprisoned on death row, awaiting execution. Jeffrey is visited in prison by his childhood friend, Dr. Frank Griffin, played by John Sutton. Frank is the brother of the late Jack Griffin, the scientist who famously experimented with invisibility in the original film, played by Claude Rains. Frank has secretly continued his brother's work and sneaks a dose of invisibility formula to Jeffrey, who takes it and sheds his clothes while the guards aren't looking, then successfully slips out of prison. Inspector Sampson from Scotland Yard, played by Cecil Kellaway, is assigned to the case. He recalls the strange case of Jack Griffin and quickly deduces what has happened, as Frank Griffin was the last visitor in Jeffrey's cell. Sampson pays a visit to the Griffin laboratory, but Frank refuses to tell him anything. Meanwhile, Jeffrey makes his way to a hidden suitcase containing a set of clothes and then heads to a farmhouse owned by one of Dr. Griffin's patients. His fiancée, Helen, played by Nan Gray, is nervously waiting there to meet him. Jeffrey arrives looking very much like Griffin from the first film, bandages wrapped over his face, dark goggles, and gloved hands. Jeffrey realizes he's in a race for time. Those injected with the serum slowly go mad, and he's already starting to show signs of irritability. Frank begins furiously working on an antidote to the formula while Jeffrey tries to track down his brother's true murderer and prove his innocence. The interesting thing about Vincent's appearance in this film is that he barely appears in it at all. He's either invisible or wrapped with bandages for the majority of the film, and in fact, we only see his face on screen a scant 1 minute and 5 seconds. he still manages to carry the film through his voice alone and display a wide range of emotions, particularly late in the film when he's going mad from the serum. The Invisible Man Returns was scripted by Lester Cole and Kurt Siodmak. Kurt also wrote 2 other Invisible films, Invisible Woman in 1940 and Invisible Agent in 1942, as well as scripts for a number of influential films for Universal Studios, including The Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and House of Frankenstein. The Invisible Man Returns is an effective sequel and creative follow-up to the original The Invisible Man, directed by James Whale, who Vincent would go on to work with later that same year in the film Green Hell. Now, the special effects are pretty well done, even though we can see wires making objects suspend in midair from time to time. It was directed by Joe May, whom Vincent would go on to work with in his next picture, The House of Seven Gables. After spending the majority of the previous film unseen, Vincent next appeared in The House of Seven Gables, a big screen adaptation of the Nathan L. Hawthorne novel of the same name. The film begins with a close-up shot of a book, which opens of its own accord, and the pages turn as we learn the backstory of the house and its owners, the Pynchon family. Our story picks up 160 years later on a rainy September night in the year 1828. Lawyer Jaffrey Pynchon, played by George Sanders, has been summoned home to the House of Seven Gables by his father Gerald, played by Gilbert Emery, who lives in the house with Jaffrey's older brother Clifford, played by Vincent Price, and Clifford's fiancée Hepzibah, played by Margaret Lindsay. Clifford is a composer who has just sold his first piece of music, which he sings in its entirety, a song entitled The Color of Your Eyes. The instrumental version of that song is used throughout the movie, by the way, as the theme song. Jaffrey is informed that his father and Clifford plan to sell the House of Seven Gables to pay the family's looming debts. It appears that due to a series of bad investments, mostly advised by Jaffrey, the family is nearly bankrupt. Jaffrey is upset and protests the sale, primarily because he secretly believes in an old witch's tale that there is a secret treasure hidden somewhere within the walls of the house. He also believes very much in the Mall curse, which Clifford takes no stock in whatsoever. Yet despite Clifford's doubts, his father does fall prey to the family curse. One afternoon, after an argument with Clifford over the family finances, he suddenly clutches his throat and falls to the ground, striking his head in the process. Clifford is tried in court and found guilty of his father's murder. Before being carried away, he laughingly mocks his brother and reminds him of Matthew Mall's curse. Meanwhile, Jaffrey learns, much to his dismay, that in his father's will he left the entire House of Seven Gables to Hepzibah. She orders him to get out and never to return. While in prison, Clifford meets a young abolitionist named Matthew Mall, played by Dick Foran, who is serving 10 days in prison for a minor offense. Turns out this is one of the infamous Matthew Mall's ancestors, and the two form a fast friendship. Over the years that Clifford is in prison, Hepzibah grows bitter and cold, and the house begins to fall into disrepair. Her distant cousin Phoebe, played by Nan Gray, moves in with her, as her own parents died and she has nowhere else to turn. They begin running a scent shop out of the Seven Gables, selling sweets and small items to help make ends meet. After 20 years' time, the governor commutes Clifford's sentence and he is freed. Once Clifford gets home, he sets out to restore his good name. Together with the help of Matthew Mall, they succeed in saving the House of Seven Gables and exposing Jaffrey as a lying criminal who not only wrongly accused him, but has been stealing money from the locals and investing in slave trade. Jaffrey gets his comeuppance in a dramatic scene where he dies mysteriously, another apparent victim of the Mall curse. Interestingly, this was the first in a string of house films in which Vincent would appear. He would go on to make House of Wax, House on Haunted Hill, House of Usher, House of 1,000 Dolls, Madhouse, House of Long Shadows, and Bloodbath at the House of Death, as well as a number of house TV episodes, including the Canadian horror host program, the hilarious House of Frankenstein.
Another lovely day begins. Ghosts and ghouls with greenish skin. So close your eyes and you will find that you've arrived in Frankenstein. Perhaps the Count will find a way to make his monster work today. For if he solves this monster mania, he can return to Transylvania. So welcome where the sun won't shine, to the castle of Count Frightenstein.
One more house film Vincent would appear in is a remake of The House of Seven Gables in 1963, part of a trio of stories in the film Twice Told Tales. That version would focus even more on the supernatural elements and less on the romantic ones. House of Seven Gables was directed by Joe May, with whom Vincent had worked in his previous film, The Invisible Man Returns. A number of actors reunited from that film, including Alan Napier, Cecil Kellaway, and Nan Gray, who had also worked with Vincent on both The Tower of London and The Invisible Man Returns. House of Seven Gables is an important film in Vincent Price's career. Not only did it return him to leading man status, but it's the first Gothic film in which he would appear, and is a precursor to the Corman Poe series, which he would be best remembered for. Overall, The House of Seven Gables is an entertaining romantic drama with supernatural overtones. Vincent is quite good in it, and it's interesting to think about. If this film had been made probably a decade later, Vincent would definitely have been cast in the villain role. Instead, he's still being put in hero parts, and he's very good in it, as is Dick Foran, who would go on later that same year to make The Mummy's Hand. Vincent's next film after The House of Seven Gables was Green Hell, the jungle action-adventure film from director James Whale. Shot in 1940, the film opens in a foreign port where David Richardson, played by Vincent Price, has arrived by horse-drawn carriage. He makes his way through a bustling street to a seedy, smoke-filled dive. There he meets Dr. Lauren, played by Alan Hale, who is sharing a drink with a man named Forrester, played by George Sanders. Lauren is a scientist and archaeologist who is, as Vincent puts it,
a great scientist and archaeologist like yourself, starting off on a wild goose chase to find Inca ruins and buried treasure in the jungle.
They're joined by Keith Brandon, played by Douglas Fairbanks Jr., the leader of the expedition. Vincent offers the intrepid explorers a piece of advice.
It's a friendly tribe. Look out for those Mangaromos. They're headhunters.
He also asks to join the party and agrees to, even though they'll be gone for 1 to 2 years. Also part of the expedition is Big Tex Morgan, played by George Bancroft, and Hal Scott, played by John Howard. The troop shoves off the following evening in a caravan of wooden rafts until they get to the heart of the jungle, where they proceed on foot. They make their way through thick brush and stock footage animals to an abandoned Inca ruin.
Senor Brandon, look, ruin, we find it.
There they set up camp and build a series of bamboo huts. They blast through the ruins with dynamite, which seems to be the troops' main means of exploring the temple. So much for preserving ancient artifacts. There they discover a hidden subterranean passage, and this is actually the coolest part of the film, with some spooky sets and atmosphere. The group spots a lone native slinking off into a side chamber and decides to follow him to see where he's going. This passageway leads to an upper level of the tomb and opens outside. Richardson makes his way to the edge of a cliff to try to get a better look and is promptly met with a quick surprise.
Take care, Richardson.
And that pretty much ends Vincent's participation in this film. Thank you very much. We get one more quick shot of Vincent writhing in pain in this melodramatic scene.
It's a filthy death.
Richardson, you'll be all right.
Poor devil.
Richardson's wife, Stephanie, played by Joan Bennett, shows up at the camp several weeks later looking for her husband. She is distraught to learn he's died, doubly so when she learns he's been unfaithful to her, with a mistress on the side. The rest of this picture concerns a loose plot of Brandon and Forrester each trying to woo Stephanie, and the attack of the neighboring cannibal tribe, angry at the violation of their temple. Vincent considered Green Hell to be one of the worst, if not the worst, pictures he ever made. One of the main problems with this picture is the script by writer Francis Marion. This movie just can't decide what it wants to be: action, romance, or horror. Director James Whale tries to balance them all within a shoestring budget, but the result is a jumbling jungle mess. This is Price's first and only time working with Whale. Both Price and Fairbanks Jr. considered this one of their worst pictures. About it, Vincent said, "About 5 of the worst pictures ever made are in that one picture." Vincent jokingly made that remark early in his career, but believe me, he would definitely go on to make worse pictures than Green Hell. The biggest problem with this film is the middle section, which is dreadfully boring, but there's still some good stuff going on in it. It's definitely worth watching for Price completists. After traipsing through the jungle in Green Hell, Vincent's next adventure was the 1940 film Brigham Young, starring Dean Jagger, Tyrone Power, and Linda Darnell. The film opens on a group of hunters gathering for a wolf hunt, which is actually code for a good old-fashioned mob. They meet by the riverbank and smear their faces in mud, presumably to hide their identities, then attack a peaceful gathering of Mormons. They beat 2 elders with a bullwhip, shoot a 3rd in the back, and burn the house and barn to the ground. The Mormons gather to discuss what to do about this, and their leader, Joseph Smith, played by Vincent Price, decides the time has come to make a stand for themselves. And if there's any more trouble, the Mormons will fight back.
Tell the people I said to arm themselves. That's treason. That if there's any more raiding, we're going to fight back.
In the very next scene, we learn that Joseph Smith has been arrested for treason and instigating an armed rebellion. The trumped-up charge goes to court, and Smith is found guilty without the jury even deliberating.
We don't have to go out, Your Honor. He's guilty.
He's incarcerated the next day and brought back for sentencing, but he never makes it back to court because an angry mob of anti-Mormons breaks into the jail and attacks Smith.
Oh, Lord, my God.
And for the second time in a row, Vincent's participation in a film is done in the first reel. The remainder of the movie deals with the Mormons' struggles to establish their religion, traveling cross-country to new territory, and the budding romance between Jonathan Kent, played by Tyrone Power, and Zena Webb, played by Linda Darnell, who would be cast as romantic leads in several more films together, including one of my all-time favorites, The Mark of Zorro. Horror fans will find this film significant as it's the first time that Vincent was teamed with fan favorite John Carradine, who he would become real-life friends with and meet again on screen in 6 more feature films as well as a number of television appearances.
Those fellows need a little lead in their bellies, and if you say the word,
Tear them limb from limb. I know.
Well, that's what they're reaching for.
Overall, Brigham Young is a well-made film that works best in the action sequences, but bogs down a bit in between. Next up for Vincent would be more fictionalized history in the 1941 film Hudson's Bay. In it, Vincent plays King Charles II, who funds an expedition to the Hudson's Bay region of northern Canada to gather furs. This expedition is led by a pair of trappers named Pierre Radisson, played by Paul Mooney, and Gooseberry, played by Laird Craig, who are joined by Englishman Lord Edward Crewe, played by John Sutton. Of course, there's a little romance thrown in between Lord Crewe and Lady Barbara Hall, played by Jean Tierney, as well as a little court intrigue, harkening back to a couple of Vincent's earlier roles. Vincent plays King Charles II with a foppish flair, in ornate clothing and draping wigs. But overall, Vincent's part is pretty one-dimensional, with little screen time and little to do. Price would go on to work with actress Jean Tierney several more times, most notably in the film noir classic Laura. Hudson's Bay was directed by Irving Pischel, best known for directing The Most Dangerous Game and Destination Moon. After Hudson's Bay, Vincent appeared on stage for most of the following year, 1942, in Angel Street, an American adaptation of the play Gaslight. In it, Vincent played the part of Mr. Manningham, who is trying to drive his wife insane and gain control of the family estate. Up to this point, Vincent had played characters that were good, even saintly in some cases. This was his first chance to play a wicked character. While a case can be made that his part in The Invisible Man Returns was a villainous role, he was under the influence of mind-altering drugs and therefore not in total control of his own actions. Angel Street gave him the chance to portray a truly malevolent character, and Vincent reveled in it, to rave reviews from the critics. Vincent's next film was The Song of Bernadette from 1943. It was the second film in which he would appear dealing with religious subject matter, but it certainly would not be the last. In the French village of Lourdes, a young girl named Bernadette, played by Jennifer Jones, sees a vision of the Virgin Mary, played by Linda Darnell, in a grotto in the woods. The clergy and town leaders doubt her at first, but slowly come to believe her through a series of miracles, primarily a spring at the grotto that has the power to heal. Vincent plays the town's imperial prosecutor du Tour, who is out to prove the girl is a fraud at all costs, including trying to have her committed to an insane asylum at one point. Many critics point to this as Vincent's first truly villainous part, but I disagree. It's convenient to say that Vincent moved immediately to playing the bad guy after portraying one successfully on Broadway in Angel Street, but it just doesn't ring true. Perhaps he did discover the joy of playing the baddie in Angel Street, but he wouldn't get his first truly villainous part until 3 years later in the film Shock. In Bernadette, he is mean-spirited and conniving, but not evil. In fact, Monsieur Jacquemet, his fellow co-conspirator in the anti-Bernadette campaign, is the true heavy of the bunch.
Now listen carefully, Bernadette. In the next room is Jacquemet. He is cruel and mean. Furthermore, he believes that everyone should be treated like a criminal. If you refuse me, I will be forced to turn you over to him. I can promise you it will be horrible. He will have you cringing and crying in no time. But I can spare you all this if you will only be reasonable. Well, what is your answer?
It is the same, monsieur. I must keep my promise to the lady.
Very well. I'm finished with you. If you're intent upon your own destruction, go.
Yes, monsieur.
Vincent's character is simply one who doesn't believe, who lacks faith, and is determined to expose her as a fraud, as summed up in this clip.
To think that one stupid girl could cause all this trouble.
Only because there are millions of others just as stupid as she is. What can you expect from a peasantry fed on religious dogmas and nurtured on superstitious nonsense? I firmly believe that this girl and what she stands for is a menace to civilization.
The girl is dangerous, I admit, but
she's a religious fanatic. And every time religious fanaticism steps forward, mankind moves backward. And that is why I will fight this vigorously, and I'll resort to any measures to defeat it.
And this is a film that values faith above all else. Right from the opening, we are told, by the end of the film, it's revealed that Prosecutor Detour has throat cancer and is dying, too proud to admit that he's wrong and partake of the healing waters, and willing to pay the ultimate price for his own arrogance.
Mother most pure. I am a stranger here. I'm not like these thousands of souls, flickering brightly and hopefully in the darkness. My pride has always stood between them and me. The pride of being a superior human being. But now I know that we are all a wretched animal species, distinguished from the insects only by nerve centers, false reasoning. A hungry cancer is feeding at my throat. Tomorrow I'll crawl back to Languedoc, hide in some hole of death and be heard of no more. I'll be alone and desolate. And why not? It's logical. I'll be alone because I have loved no one. No one and nothing. Not even myself. Nothing. Nothing.
In a way, this film predates one of Vincent's very best, in which he would portray, in a sense, a similar role, Witchfinder General from 1968. In both, he is seeking to expose young girls of collaborating with supernatural powers. In Bernadette, he follows the letter of the law to do so, seeking every legal means of disposing of the threat to the town's religious sensibilities. In Witchfinder General, he steps firmly outside the law, declaring himself judge, jury, and executioner, and gleefully torturing and killing any of those accused of witchcraft. The Song of Bernadette is a long movie, clocking in at 156 minutes. It's slow-paced, and Vincent doesn't show up until 37 minutes into the film. It takes place in France, but for some reason, everyone in the film speaks English. Vincent's first wife, Edith Barrett, appears briefly in this film, the first of 2 movies in which she would appear with her husband. Vincent is excellent in The Song of Bernadette, and there are inklings of the villainous Price to come in his performance. Vincent's next film was another based on a stage play, The Eve of St. Mark, in 1944. The film begins with a young soldier named Private Quiz West, played by William Ith, home on leave. He has brought home his girlfriend, Janet, played by Ann Baxter, to meet his parents, played by Ruth Nelson and Ray Collins. While there, he proposes to her, and she accepts.
Guess I was too young to understand what that feeling meant. I do now, though. Will you share it with me, Janet?
I'd love to.
Back at the Army base, we're introduced to Quiz's platoon, a field artillery battalion full of quirky characters, including Vincent Price as Private Francis Marion, a Southern aristocrat with a penchant for spouting poetry.
A thing of sea or land. Female of the sex, it seems, that so bedecked, ornate, and gay comes this way sailing, with all her bravery on and tackle trim, sails filled and streamers waving, courted by all the winds that hold them play, an amber scent of odorous perfume, her harbinger.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Vincent talks throughout the film in a not-so-convincing Southern accent. And believe me, I know Southern accents. At times, he pulls it off okay. At others, not so much.
Yes, but then another question arises. How close do I have to come to being horizontal before I earn the right to remain perpendicular?
I don't know that either.
No, I suppose nobody knows that, or we'd been told by this time.
I know one thing. I read through the entire soldier's handbook again last night, and it's not in there.
No, I looked for it there. I shall look for it tonight at the bottom of a Coke with rum. Hey, there's our bus. Come on, kid.
The troop gets word that they're to be redeployed to San Francisco. Quiz gets a 48-hour pass and visits home briefly to say his goodbyes to Janet and his parents.
Will you wait for me, Janet?
You know I will.
The reunion doesn't last long, however, as he is deployed to combat right away and stationed on a small island in the Pacific. The remainder of the movie cuts back and forth between Quiz and his regiment trying to hold the island from the Japanese and his loved ones back home, waiting and worrying if he's all right. On the island, the soldiers are hit with a vicious bout of malaria, and several men are knocked out of commission, including Private Marion. Vincent had previously worked with the star of this picture, William Ith, in The Song of Bernadette. Like Bernadette, this film also has religious overtones, the title referring to a Catholic holiday.
So this is the Eve of St. Mark.
Hey, what is with that St. Mark there?
It's an old legend. On St. Mark's Eve, if a maiden stands in the door of a church, she will see inside the church all those who are going to die that year. Yes, gentlemen, I'm afraid but Peter qualifies.
Well, I'm glad this ain't a church, that's all.
Church is any place a group of people worship God.
Sure, during the past few weeks, we've all said a prayer or two in here.
This film was directed by John Stahl, who Vincent would go on to work with in two more pictures, Leave Her to Heaven and The Keys of the Kingdom. The film's stage play roots are easily recognized, with much of the film taking place in long chunks in a single location, most notably the cave where the troop holds up from Japanese bombers. Also appearing in this film is Harry Morgan, best known later for his roles in Dragnet and MASH. He plays Private Shevlin, one of Vincent's fellow soldiers. They would appear together later in the 1946 classic Dragonwyck. This film is a morale booster, pretty typical in its time, made to encourage the folks back home that their loved ones are fighting the good fight and all isn't hopeless.
After their last shell was expended and their gun destroyed by enemy fire, you may expect to hear from him in time.
He's alive.
Overall, The Eve of St. Mark is a pretty enjoyable picture. The action scenes are well done, though too few in coming. The film does tend to be a bit talky in places and a little bit sappy, but overall, it's worth watching. Vincent's next movie was the 1944 film noir classic, Laura. Laura is based on a book of the same name by Vera Caspary, which in turn is based on a 7-part serial she wrote for Collier's magazine called Ring Twice for Laura. It was developed as a stage play, and 20th Century Fox optioned the film rights. After changing creative hands several times, it was eventually assigned to Austrian director Otto Preminger. Laura tells the story of police detective Mark McPherson, played by Dana Andrews, who is investigating the murder of a young ad exec named Laura Hunt, played by Jean Tierney. Turns out the victim was shot in the face at point-blank range with a shotgun, her body discovered by her cleaning lady. Mark questions successful newspaper columnist Waldo Lydecker, played by Clifton Webb, about the murder, as he and Laura were close associates. Mark learns that Lydecker had taken a personal interest in Laura and had helped get her career started by introducing her to all the right people. He was also obviously romantically interested in Laura, despite their age difference, and spent a great deal of time chasing off and discrediting potential suitors for her affection. But the one rival he was unable to dispose of was Shelby Carpenter, played by Vincent Price. The tall, handsome Southern gentleman Shelby had managed to capture Laura's attention and eventually win her heart. They were engaged to be married, much to Lydecker's chagrin. But Shelby was a bit of a playboy and had been carrying on an affair behind Laura's back with a pretty young model from the ad agency. Lydecker exposes Shelby's unfaithfulness, and Laura was left with a tough decision. She was planning a retreat to a cabin in the woods to think it over when the murder occurred. As he learns more about the facts of this case, McPherson becomes increasingly obsessed with the beautiful young Laura. It seems she had a way of enchanting all those around her, and men in particular found her charms irresistible. He falls asleep in a chair in her apartment late one evening and is awakened by the sound of a door opening. In walks Laura, very much alive. McPherson's confused. Who was killed in her apartment? How is Laura still alive? And who was the killer? Full of twists and turns, the finale of Laura is fantastic. Everyone's a suspect, including Laura herself, and it's up to McPherson to sort out the facts and find the killer. The screenplay deviates from the book by placing the character of Waldo Lydecker as the central character, who tells much of Laura's backstory to the detective. The soundtrack is fantastic and highlighted by the theme song, simply titled Laura, an original piece by composer David Raskin. Vincent is terrific as the suave and scheming Shelby Carpenter and pulls off a southern accent much more convincingly than in his previous film.
Yes, I gave it to Laura for protection. She didn't want it, but I insisted. This house is rather isolated, as you see.
Vincent had previously worked with leading lady Jean Tierney 3 years prior in the film Hudson's Bay and would go on to work with her twice more in his career. He would also go on to work with actor Dana Andrews once more in the 1956 film noir While the City Sleeps. Vincent was also already familiar with director Otto Preminger, having worked with him previously on the stage play Outward Bound. He would go on to work with him again the following year in the film A Royal Scandal. Next up for Vincent after Laura was the 1944 film The Keys of the Kingdom, another in a line of religious-themed films in which Price would appear. film stars Gregory Peck as Father Francis Chisholm, who is being investigated by the church to discover if he is too old to continue running his parish and should possibly consider retirement. As the investigating priest turns in for the evening, he notices a journal on the shelf by his bed. This is Father Francis's personal diary, and the bulk of the movie is told through flashback as the priest reads through this journal, and we learn of Francis's path to becoming a priest and his adventures afterwards.
Nothing could have been more remote from the life I have lived than the beginning of it.
Vincent plays Father Francis's childhood friend, Angus Mealy, who is also studying to become a priest. Personality-wise, Angus and Francis couldn't be more different. Francis is quiet and unassuming, where Angus is loud and ambitious. Angus quickly climbs the ladder of succession to the church, attaining the rank of Monsignor and eventually bishop. Francis, meanwhile, struggles to maintain a parish and eventually is reassigned to a missionary outpost in China, where he flourishes, despite all manner of setbacks and adversities, establishing a church and healthy congregation. This was only Gregory Peck's second film, and he earned an Oscar nomination for Best Actor for his performance in it. Vincent isn't on screen for much of this film, appearing only briefly at the beginning of the movie and then again later in the film for a total screen time of just over 10 minutes in this 2+ hour-long movie. Vincent's quite good in the few scenes he has, however, especially late in the film when he visits Father Francis's monastery. His arrogant nature contrasts sharply against Father Francis's humble demeanor, especially in this scene at the table where Vincent haughtily refers to the Chinese as natives.
You know, I must admit China fascinates me, and I disagree violently with those of our world who still regard the Chinese as an inferior race. Truly, there are no limits to the benefits of a belief in God and plenty of soap and water.
This was the second film in which Vincent appeared with his first wife, Edith Barrett. She was also in the Song of Bernadette. In this movie, they even get to share a scene, although it's a little bit odd because she's playing his best friend's aunt, a much older lady. In real life, Edith was older than Vincent, but only by 4 years.
Sure you go.
Hello, Francis. Are you sure you have the tickets? Hello, Willie. Hello, Angus. You and Francis better get aboard. First thing you know, we'll be standing here talking and you'll miss the train.
The Keys of the Kingdom was directed by John Stahl, who Vincent had worked with previously in The Eve of St. Mark, and would go on to work with once more the following year in Leave Her to Heaven. Overall, The Keys of the Kingdom is a successful, though somewhat slow-paced picture that features an outstanding performance from Gregory Peck in the lead role. It also features an early screen appearance from Roddy McDowall as a young Father Francis. Next up for Vincent was the 1945 costume period piece, A Royal Scandal. Based on the play Die Zarin, it tells the story of Catherine the Great, ruler of Russia, played by Tallulah Bankhead. Lieutenant Alexei Chernov, played by William Ith, arrives at the court with desperate news for the Empress. Two of her generals are planning treason.
But General Pekowski and General Gashi...
Two of my best generals.
Don't trust them, Your Majesty. They have evil thoughts. They're planning treason.
Catherine is most grateful for the information and promotes him to the rank of captain. She grows increasingly infatuated with the handsome young Alexei and further promotes him to the rank of major, then colonel, then commander of the palace guards, and eventually general. The majority of the film follows the whims of the spoiled and manipulative Catherine. Unknown to the Empress, a revolt is being planned in her court, and the hot-headed Alexei becomes caught up in the intrigue.
And at dawn we all meet at the palace, and Russia is ours.
Russia is ours! I idolized that woman.
Oh, Alexei, we must come to a decision. If we don't move right now, we are lost, every one of us. What is your answer?
I'm with you.
Vincent appears as the French ambassador Marquis de Fleury. He doesn't have much screen time, appearing only briefly at the beginning and again at the end of the film. He speaks in a ridiculous French accent in English for some reason.
In the name of my sovereign, I thank your excellency for the expression of welcome and friendship. My monarch and the whole French people united in admiration and respect for your grand empress, Her Majesty Catherine II. Vive la Russie!
Vive la France!
Not necessarily Vincent's best performance. I kind of have a problem anyway with movies where everyone speaks in English in foreign countries, but I understand that's sort of the way movies were made back then. But it doesn't hold up well with time. A Royal Scandal was directed by Otto Preminger, with whom Vincent had worked the previous year in Laura. It was a cast Vincent was very familiar with, having appeared with leading man William Eythe previously in The Song of Bernadette and The Eve of St. Mark. Actress Anne Baxter, who played Countess Anna, also appeared in The Eve of St. Mark. After A Royal Scandal, Vincent's next film was the historical piece Wilson. Head of Fox Studios Darryl F. Zanuck had a real penchant for producing films based, largely inaccurately, on historical figures. This is another in a long line of such films from Fox Studios. Wilson is based on the life of President Woodrow Wilson, played by Alexander Knox, and chronicles his rise from President of Princeton to 28th President of the United States, serving during the First World War. In this film, Price plays the small role of political advisor and later cabinet member William Gibbs McAdoo.
Wilson's at the governor's mansion in Seagirt. We'd better get him on the telephone. I don't like the way this Bryan thing is going.
Neither do I, but McCombs here's his campaign manager. He doesn't seem to think there's anything to worry about.
It's too early. Besides, the Associated Press, every newspaper in New York has a direct wire to the governor's place. He probably already knows what's going on.
Price is barely in this film and contributes little. In fact, his part could be cut out completely and not matter one bit. A good deal of the film he spends standing around watching other actors perform. A true waste of his talents. Clocking in at over 2.5 hours, this film was lavishly expensive, costing close to $4 million to make, an enormous amount at that time. This film was intended as a blockbuster, but audiences hated it, which of course meant the Academy Awards loved it. Wilson was nominated for 10 awards, including Best Picture, and won 5 for art direction, cinematography, film editing, sound, and screenplay. Vincent jokingly referred to Green Hill as his worst picture, but I'd rather rewatch that anytime over this piece of boring dreck. And that's the worst problem with Wilson. It's dreadfully boring. Clocking in at over 2.5 hours, it consists of scene after scene of political rallies and speeches. It is, to put it bluntly, a piece of political propaganda meant to prop up Zanuck's personal hero, Wilson, and rewrite history. But audiences weren't buying it. Made in 1944, it wouldn't be released until 1945. A truly dreadful film, this is one to avoid. After Wilson, Vincent's next picture was the 1945 film noir feature Leave Her to Heaven. Shot in color, it's an adaptation of the novel of the same name by Ben Ames Williams. The bulk of the story is told in flashback as lawyer Glenn Roby, played by Ray Collins, relates the story of his client, Richard Harlan, played by Cornell Wilde, who is being released after a 2-year stint in prison.
There's some things that couldn't be told in a courtroom. Yet of all the people involved, I suppose I'm the only one who knew the whole story. You see, it was through me they first met. He'd been working very hard on a new book. I invited him up to my place in New Mexico for a rest. They met on the train.
The flashback begins on the train where Richard meets a beautiful woman named Ellen, played by Jean Tierney. She is immediately taken by Richard's close resemblance to her recently deceased father.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was staring at you, wasn't I? I didn't mean to, really. It's only because you look so much like my father. When he was younger, of course, your age. A most remarkable resemblance.
They discover that they're both staying at the Jacinto Ranch for vacation, along with her mother and stepsister Ruth, played by Jean Crane. Ellen and Richard quickly fall in love. The problem is, Ellen is engaged to an aspiring politician named Russell Quinton, played by Vincent Price. She quickly dumps Quinton, to his dismay, and asks Richard to marry her, even though she's only known him for 3 days.
Darling, will you marry me?
Why, you unpredictable little...
And I'll never let you go. Never.
The remainder of the film deals with Ellen's unhealthy obsession with Richard, one that grows so extreme that she'll take any measures to have him to himself, including letting his younger, disabled brother drown in a lake while she watches coldly from a rowboat.
Ellen! Ellen! Help me!
Richard is understandably devastated by the death of his brother. They were extremely close, and in part to make up for this, Ellen allows herself to become pregnant. But once she realizes how all-encompassing motherhood is, and that she will never truly have Richard to herself once a child is born, she throws herself down a stairwell and has a miscarriage.
Ellen.
When Ellen returns from the hospital, she accuses Richard of having an affair with her younger sister, Ruth. Richard has finally had enough and leaves Ellen, moving out of the house. In a final act of vengeance, she commits suicide, poisoning herself, framing her sister Ruth for her death in the process and making it look like murder. She sends a letter to former fiancé Russell Quinton, now district attorney, detailing her suspicions of her sister. The case goes to court with the state out to prove
Murder. Cold, brutal, premeditated murder. The state will prove that on the afternoon of September 5th, at a picnic attended by Ellen Harland, her mother, and her adopted sister, that Ellen met death as a result of poisoning. The state will prove that the sugar with which Ellen that day sweetened her coffee was mixed with poison, and that she met death by reason of that poison. The state will prove that the defendant had both motive and opportunity to commit this dreadful crime. And the state will prove that the defendant, Ruth Barrett, deliberately and maliciously plotted and carried through the murder.
After a lengthy and heated court case, Ruth is eventually found not guilty, due in large part to this testimony from Richard.
Do you honestly believe Ellen committed suicide? Yes. Knowing her as you did and I did, you think her capable not only of committing suicide, but falsely accusing her own sister of her death?
Ellen was capable of anything.
You actually want the jury to believe that she was that sort of monster?
Yes, she was that sort of monster. A woman who sought to possess everything she loved, who loved only for what it could bring her, whose love estranged her own father and mother, whose love possessed her father until he couldn't call his soul his own, who by her own confession to me killed my brother, killed her own unborn child, and who is now reaching from the grave to destroy her innocent sister. Yes, she was that sort of monster.
Richard, however, was sentenced to 2 years prison time on a technicality. The film ends with his returning to Ruth and the two embracing happily. Leave Her to Heaven was directed by John Stahl, whom Vincent had previously worked with on The Eve of St. Mark and Keys of the Kingdom. Leave Her to Heaven is a terrific film, and although Vincent's only in it briefly, he does an excellent part with his role, particularly late in the film during the courtroom scenes. This is definitely one of the best pictures that he made with 20th Century Fox, and one I highly recommend. After Leave Her to Heaven, Vincent next appeared in the 1946 film Shock. The film begins at the Belmont Arms Hotel in San Francisco, where Janet Stewart, played by Annabelle Shaw, is checking in to meet her husband, Lieutenant Paul Stewart, played by Frank Lattimore. She falls asleep in her hotel room and awakens late that night to discover that Paul still hasn't arrived. She then wanders onto the balcony where she oversees a neighboring couple arguing. She overhears the man, played by Vincent Price, has been having an affair and in fact was meeting his mistress at this hotel. His wife followed him there and confronted him. He informs her that he wants a divorce, to which she angrily agrees, threatening to go to the newspapers and spread all the dirty details of his scandalous affair. The argument heats up, and when she tries to grab the phone, it escalates to physical violence.
You're not ready. Been up to... I hate you.
Her husband arrives the following morning and finds her sitting on the couch, staring blankly into space, unable to speak. The hotel doctor inspects her, but informs her husband that this is outside his area of expertise. But fortunately, there's an expert in this field staying in the very hotel, Dr. Richard Cross. A few minutes later, Dr. Cross arrives and in walks Vincent himself. He quickly pieces together the cause of Janet's ailment. She must have suffered some sort of shock and is catatonic. He suggests that she is taken immediately to his sanatorium for treatment. Once there, he sets out to discover just how much she witnessed.
Are you living permanently at the hotel?
No, as a matter of fact, we've got to clear out by noon.
Oh, I see. But then I'd better take her to my place. She's going to need someone with her night and day.
Dr. Cross has a private sanatorium just out of town.
I see. Believe me, Lieutenant, it's best for her.
His nurse, Elaine Jordan, played by Lynn Barry, drops by his house later that evening. We learn that Elaine is the mistress that Cross was having an affair with. Cross informs her that he hid his wife's body in a trunk and had it shipped to his lodge in the country. They then discuss what to do about Janet.
Now no one knows. We're safe.
You're forgetting Janet Stewart, aren't you? She knows. What if she talks?
I haven't forgotten her. She can't tell what she's seen as long as she's in this condition, can she?
Shock will wear off in a couple of weeks at the most.
It'll wear off if you let it, Dick.
Elaine, I'm a doctor.
She'll talk only if you let her. You mean too much to me. It's the only way out, Dick. It's the one and only way out for us.
Dr. Cross keeps Janet sedated and tries hypnotism, attempting to make her forget what she witnessed. Meanwhile, Janet's husband calls for a second opinion. Enter Dr. Harvey, a colleague and former instructor that Cross studied under. He questions Cross's findings and suggests he lay off the sedatives. Dr. Cross tries to convince both Janet and her husband that she's delusional. He's growing increasingly desperate and feeling increasingly guilty over his wife's murder. Together with Elaine, he devises a plan to get rid of Janet once and for all.
If a man wanted to, if he had courage, he could get rid of her and no one would ever know. The doctor has an advantage. I could give her insulin shock treatment. Shock treatment's indicated in a case like hers. I could give her 4 injections. Then with the last one, an overdose. No one would ever know the difference.
Then we'd be safe.
But things don't go quite that smoothly for Dr. Cross. The police have grown suspicious of the circumstances surrounding his wife's death. Janet's husband is growing increasingly suspicious of Cross's motives, and Janet herself is increasingly insistent that she saw Dr. Cross commit murder.
Please, please, please help me. Get the police here, please.
We don't need the police, Mrs. Stewart. You come along with me and everything will be all right.
You don't understand. There's nothing the matter with me. I want the police.
Shock was filmed in 1946, a good 8 years before Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, another film that features a similar theme of an innocent bystander witnessing a murder through a neighboring window. Rear Window was based on a 1942 short story by Cornell Woolrich called It Had to Be Murder. It isn't too much of a stretch, therefore, to suppose that the story could have been the inspiration for both films, particularly as most of Price's films with 20th Century Fox were based on books or other previously published material. Shock was directed by Alfred Worker, and it's an important film in the Price filmography as it was his first truly villainous part. Prior to this, the closest thing were his parts in The Invisible Man Returns and The Song of Bernadette, neither of which were straight villainous parts. Shock gave him the chance to play a truly malevolent character, a murderer, and though he still felt remorse for his wife's death, his own actions kept drawing him deeper and deeper down a dark path. This film is also interesting as it gives us a glimpse inside the medical profession at that time, and in particular, the psychiatric field. How accurate a glimpse, however, is up for debate as they have some pretty questionable practices inside the Cross Sanatorium, including smoking and handing out sedatives like candy.
Put her to bed and have Dr. Stevens give her an injection of scopolamine.
Yes, doctor.
She's had her injection. She was restless and we gave her a sedative.
I noticed, Richard, you've been giving her sedatives.
Give her a hypodermic, nurse.
For a moment, she became very violent. I had to give her a sedative.
I could give her 4 injections. The treatment itself consists of a series of shocks brought on by injections of insulin.
Overall, Shock is an effective film noir. It's fast-paced with a short runtime and an excellent performance from Vincent in the lead role. Next up for Vincent after Shock was the 1946 Gothic romance Dragonwyck, a costume period piece based on the novel of the same name. Our story begins on a Connecticut farm in the year 1844, where a young girl named Miranda Wells, played by Jean Tierney, lives with her parents, played by Walter Houston and Anne Revere. One day, a letter arrives from a distant cousin named Nicholas Van Ryn, played by Vincent Price, the wealthy owner of the sprawling Dragonwyck estate, inquiring if one of the Wells daughters could move to Dragonwyck to serve as governess for his young daughter, Katrine. Miranda's parents initially refused, but she eventually persuades them to let her go. Once at the estate, Miranda quickly learns that her simple country ways differ greatly from the fancy affairs at Dragonwyck. Nicholas and his wife Johanna, played by Vivian Osborne, are aloof and cold towards one another, and all but neglect their daughter Katrine, played by Connie Marshall. In addition, a sense of dark foreboding hangs over the mansion, and a maid offers this word of warning.
One day you will wish with all your heart you'd never come to Dragonwyck.
As Miranda struggles to fit in with high-class society, Nicholas takes an immediate liking to her, smitten with her beauty and innocent charm. Nicholas is a rich land baron who leases his land to farmers. These tenants are unhappy with this arrangement and wish to purchase the land for themselves. Nicholas refuses, and they threaten revolt. One evening, Nicholas gives an oleander plant to his wife as offer of apology for being so distant. She cheers up immediately and expresses her wish to spend more time together and travel.
Why, Nicholas, it's your favorite oleander.
I thought it would brighten your room and perhaps make your stay in bed less unbearable.
Oh, thank you so much. Can't remember when anything has pleased me more.
Nicholas agrees, but later that evening tragedy strikes, and Joanna dies suddenly and mysteriously. The town doctor, Dr. Jeff Turner, played by Glenn Langan, is unable to discover the cause.
Dr. Turner.
I can't understand it. It doesn't make sense.
Seemingly within minutes of his wife's death, Nicholas expresses his love for Miranda. Shocked, she leaves the estate the following day and moves back to her parents' house. She soon realizes, however, that she has grown accustomed to the extravagant surroundings and lifestyle of Dragonwyck, and has, in fact, grown equally fond of Nicholas as well. He calls on her and they agree to be married, to her parents' disappointment. They don't like or trust the haughty and arrogant Nicholas. Nicholas and Miranda return to Dragonwyck, but over time she discovers that her life there isn't the idyllic, happy one that she'd envisioned. Nicholas is self-obsessed and increasingly distant, and displays his general disdain for the church and religion in particular, which is in diametric opposition with Miranda's devout Christian upbringing.
Now let us enjoy our lunch.
Nicholas, you do believe in God.
I believe in myself, and I am answerable to myself. I will not live according to printed mottos like the directions on a medicine bottle.
Nicholas is arrogant and mean-spirited, and Vincent pulls this off perfectly, as demonstrated in this scene where he derides Miranda for hiring a lame housekeeper named Peggy, played by Jessica Tandy.
And what was that strange little creature?
That was Peggy. Peggy O'Malley.
I assumed it had a name. What was it doing here?
I've engaged her as my personal maid.
Your maid, that untidy little cripple?
She's not untidy, and her leg's no fault of hers. She's had a miserable life.
It's the strangest recommendation I've ever heard.
She's bright and willing and good to me, and Nicholas, I want her as my maid.
I shall have McNabb give her some extra money and a good character.
It's so little to ask. Please, Nicholas.
Deformed bodies depress me.
Meanwhile, Miranda discovers she's pregnant. Nicholas is thrilled. He desperately wants a son to carry on the Van Ryn name, and his previous wife had been unable to provide him with one. His excitement is short-lived, however, as his son is born with a congenital heart defect and dies within minutes. Before the baby passes away, Miranda baptizes him, further infuriating Nicholas.
Please, don't leave her now. Please.
Loathsome little cripple. Why should you have been permitted to live and not my son?
Nicholas begins spending an increasing amount of time isolated, locked away in a private chamber in an upper tower of the house. Miranda eventually confronts him there and discovers he has become a drug addict.
Shall I tell you what you want to know? Brace yourself. Prepare to have your God-fearing, farm-bred, prayer-fattened morality shaken to its core. See, I have become what is vulgarly known as a drug addict.
Between the drugs and the stress, Nicholas begins acting increasingly odd. When Miranda falls mysteriously ill, her housekeeper Peggy pays a visit to Dr. Turner. She tells him how irrational Nicholas is acting and describes how Miranda fell mysteriously ill after Nicholas brought a plant into her room, an oleander plant, very much like the one Dr. Turner saw in Nicholas's previous wife's room. Piecing together that Nicholas is trying to kill Miranda as he had his first wife, Dr. Turner rushes back to Dragonwyck to save the day. Dragonwyck was directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who also wrote the screenplay. This was his directorial debut, and he handles this film expertly. This was Vincent's fourth and final screen appearance with actress Jean Tierney, having previously worked with her in Laura, Leave Her to Heaven, and Hudson's Bay. Vincent is excellent as the diabolical Van Ryn, and this is the second consecutive film in which he murders his wife. Price seemed custom-made for Gothic films, particularly ones that revolved around old dark houses. In that sense, Dragonwyck is reminiscent of the House of Seven Gables and a precursor to the later series of Poe films Price would become best known for with director Roger Corman. As would happen so often in Price films over the years, his character meets a violent end, shot to death in a confrontation with the townspeople.
Have it your way, then.
Overall, Dragonwyck is an entertaining Gothic romance with supernatural overtones. It features Price in the lead role in full villainous mode. Studios had finally, by this time, caught on to the fact that Price's true talent lay in playing the baddie, something he would do extensively for the remainder of his career. After Dragonwyck, Vincent next appeared in the 1947 film noir thriller Moss Rose, based on the Joseph Shearing novel The Crime of Laura Sorrell. The story begins with a young blonde woman named Rose Linton on board a train recounting how she will never forget the following tragic events, no matter how many miles she puts behind her. The story is then told in flashback to Victorian London with occasional narration by Rose. Rose recalls how she was working as a line dancer in a theater when her fellow dancer and best friend Daisy was killed. She came home late one evening to discover a man in a white coat, played by Victor Mature, leaving Daisy's apartment. Inside, she found her best friend dead, sprawled across her bed. There was an open Bible on the bed beside her with a single rose lying across it. Enter Inspector Clinner, played by Vincent Price, and Deputy Inspector Evans, played by Reese Williams. They determine that Rose was drugged and smothered. They inquire about the Bible and are told that Daisy didn't own one. Vincent is a horticultural expert and identifies the flower as a moss rose, a variety that is out of season at the moment.
Well, she wasn't much for baubles or flowers.
Poor thing, they both are a great blessing. I don't know what I should do without my garden. Seems to be a well-grown moss rose.
After the police leave, Rose recalls seeing the same man get into a cab with Daisy the previous evening. After a bit of detective work, she manages to get the man's name from the cab driver. His name is Michael Drago, and she shows up at his apartment and attempts to blackmail him. He initially refuses, but after an interrogation at the police department, he agrees to meet to discuss her terms. They meet on a fog-shrouded bridge late one night. Turns out she isn't after money, however. What she really wants is to live the lifestyle of the rich, something she's dreamed of her entire life. Drago agrees to let her stay at his house for 2 weeks, and they concoct a story explaining that she helped him out of a spot of trouble and he invited her to stay with him by way of thanks. Once there, she meets Michael's fiancée, Audrey, played by Patricia Medina, and mother, Lady Margaret Drago, played by Ethel Barrymore. Audrey is none too happy with the idea of this strange woman staying with them, but Lady Margaret takes an immediate liking to Rose. However, all is not as it seems at the peaceful country estate, as Rose learns when she wanders accidentally into a sealed room containing all of Michael's carefully preserved childhood playthings, much to Lady Margaret's displeasure. Police Inspector Clinner and Evans also turn up at the estate and discover that there's an arbor of moss roses there, moss roses that are in season year-round. The conclusion of Moss Rose is full of twists and turns, and Rose herself ends up in danger, drugged and almost smothered just as her friend Daisy had been. The police arrive just in time to save the day and catch the killer. Moss Rose was directed by Gregory Randolph for 20th Century Fox and was one of 3 films released in theaters in the same week featuring Vincent Price, giving audiences in May of 1947 multiple opportunities to see Vincent on the big screen. Ethel Barrymore, who played Lady Margaret Drago, was a member of the famous Barrymore family, sister to famed actors Lionel and John Barrymore, and great aunt to current actress Drew Barrymore. Vincent would meet Victor Mature, who played Michael Drago, 3 more times on screen in the 1950s. Peggy Cummins, who played Rose in this film, would go on to star in one of my all-time favorite movies, the Jacques Tourneur classic, Curse of the Demon. Also appearing in this movie in a very brief cameo is George Zucco as Lady Margaret's butler. This was Vincent's one and only appearance with this horror legend. After Moss Rose, Vincent's contract with 20th Century Fox expired and he wisely chose not to renew it. Rather than continue as just another contract player in bit parts for Fox, Vincent was now free to be more selective with his roles and choose parts that fully showcased his talents. He wouldn't work again with Fox until 1958 in The Fly. After Moss Rose, Vincent next appeared in the 1947 film noir, The Web. Attorney Robert Regan, played by Edmund O'Brien, is hired by wealthy industrialist Andrew Colby, played by Vincent Price, as a personal bodyguard. Colby is the head of Colby Enterprises and is fearful that someone will try and assassinate him. He hires Regan as his bodyguard for protection and to avoid negative publicity. On Regan's first night on the job, there's a gunshot and a cry for help. He rushes upstairs to see a stranger with a gun turned towards him. Regan fires and kills the man.
Regan, look out!
The man turns out to be Leopold Kroner, a former business associate of Colby's who was recently released from prison. The police question Regan, and Lieutenant D'Amico, played by William Bendix, has his suspicions that something isn't on the up and up. It turns out that Kroner was jailed for counterfeiting $1 million in bonds, but the $1 million was never found. He tells Regan not to leave town. Regan asks out Colby's secretary, Noel Faraday, played by Ella Raines. She agrees, at Colby's suggestion, although somewhat reluctantly. It's obvious that she and Colby were, at one point, romantically involved. Colby had never suggested she spend time with another man before, and Regan suspects that Colby wants her to spy on him to find out what the police had questioned him about. When he confronts her, she denies it and angrily ends the date. When Regan returns home to his apartment, he is surprised to find himself once again at gunpoint. On the other end of the pistol is Kroner's daughter, Martha, played by Maria Palmer. He manages to disarm her and learns that her father was actually invited to Colby's house. He also learns that Kroner was a pacifist and as gentle a man as ever lived. He would never have threatened Colby's life. Regan realizes he was set up and framed for murder, and with Noel's help, determines to clear his name and expose Colby as the true killer. We also learn that Colby has been responsible for multiple murders in addition to Kroner. Anyone who got in his way or no longer fit into his plans was done away with, including his right-hand man, Charles Murdoch. However, that ruthlessness and overconfidence are ultimately Colby's undoing, thanks to the work of one very clever police lieutenant. The Web is a fun little film that features a few twists, several murders, and an excellent performance from Vincent as a cold-blooded killer. It was one of 3 films featuring Price that were released within the same week in May 1947. It was produced by Universal and was Price's first work for a studio outside of Fox since 1940. By this point in his career, Price was becoming a favorite among filmgoers, who were eating up his performances as the baddie. Next up for Vincent after The Web was another black and white film noir from 1947, The Long Night. The story begins with a blind man named Frank Dunlap, played by Elijah Cook Jr., returning home to the boarding house where he rents a room. Inside, he hears a gunshot from an upper floor. We see a man clutching his stomach stagger outside a room, then fall down a flight of stairs, dead. This is stage magician Maximilian the Great, played by Vincent Price. Inside the room where the man came from is war veteran Joe Adams, played by Henry Fonda. Police head upstairs to investigate and are greeted with more shots through the door.
Get out of here.
Joe barricades himself inside his room, and we learn the details of how he landed in this predicament through flashback. Joe was working in a factory as a sandblaster when a young lady named Joanne, played by Barbara Bell Geddes, arrives to deliver flowers for Joe's supervisor. Joe and Joanne hit it off immediately. They discover that in addition to similar names, they also both grew up in the same orphanage. They begin seeing each other as much as possible, and Joe even entertains thoughts of marriage. One evening, Joe stops in to see Joanne and finds her already dressed up. She has plans. A bit dejected, he leaves the apartment and waits outside to smoke a cigarette. A few minutes later, he sees her leave hurriedly. Curious, Joe follows her to a nightclub called Al King's Jungle, where stage magician Maximilian the Great is entertaining in front of a packed house. Joanne stakes a spot just off stage where she can watch, and after the show, joins Max at his private table. Joe makes his way to the bar where he runs into Maximilian's assistant, Charlene, played by Anne Dvorak. She had stormed off stage earlier, unannounced, in the middle of Maximilian's act, and is feeling particularly chatty. She proceeds to tell Joe all about what a smooth-talking shyster Maximilian is, a con artist with a knack for using women, including her. Joe and Charlene begin an on-again, off-again love affair, and Charlene begins to really fall for Joe, although she can tell the feeling's not mutual. He is still wrapped up over Joanne. One day, Max shows up at Charlene's apartment while Joe is there. He asks to speak to Joe in private and reveals to him that he is actually Joanne's father. He asks that Joe stop seeing her. He wants more for her than a life of drudgery tied to a penniless factory worker. Joe is furious and confronts Joanne about this. She tells him that Max is not her father. That was just another of Max's many lies. He is a scheming womanizer who first met Joanne one evening during a performance when she was pulled out of the audience at random. They went out from time to time to plays and events, but it was never anything serious, despite Max's best attempts. Joe and Joanne decide to get married. Maximilian stops by Joe's apartment one afternoon to confront him about Joanne. He proceeds to taunt and talk down to him until Joe snaps and attacks him.
Enjoy yourself. Just top it on. You can laugh all the way down. Huh? Please. Huh? Please. Please. Okay, I'll let you go this time. Now get going.
Max then pulls a gun from his coat and reveals he had originally come there to kill Joe. He tosses the gun onto the dresser and starts to leave, but stops again on the way out and begins taunting Joe anew, intimating that he and Joanne had been more than just friends.
You won't shut up, I'll shut you.
And that brings things back to present, where Joe is still holed up in his apartment, surrounded by police. Joanne eventually convinces Joe to give himself up just as police fire tear gas into his apartment. The story ends with Joanne promising to wait for Joe until he gets out of prison, no matter how long it takes. The Long Night was made in 1947 by RKO Pictures. It was directed by Russian director Anatole Litvak and is a remake of the 1939 French film Le Jour se lève. The original has a more downbeat ending, however, with the Joe character committing suicide. In The Long Night, Fonda's good guy, everyday demeanor contrasts sharply with Vincent's suave, worldly manner. It's interesting to note that Vincent's playing a much older character than Fonda, although in real life, Vincent was actually 6 years younger. This was the only film in which Price and Fonda would appear together. Also appearing briefly in this film as the blind neighbor is Elijah Cook Jr., whom Vincent would meet on screen again in two of his films which are fan favorites, House on Haunted Hill and The Haunted Palace. The Long Night is an entertaining, if somewhat overly dramatic film. Price is excellent as the scheming Maximilian, especially late in the film while taunting Joe. After The Long Night, Vincent next appeared, albeit briefly, in the 1948 comedy Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. The film featured America's premier comedy duo, Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, alongside a host of horror fiends including Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi, the Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney Jr., and the Frankenstein's monster, played by Glenn Strange. Vincent doesn't appear in the film until the final minute of the film, and in fact doesn't physically appear on screen at all. He does, however, briefly reprise his role from the 1940 film The Invisible Man Returns in this memorable scene.
Now that we've seen the last of Dracula, the Wolfman and the monster, there's nobody to frighten us anymore.
Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping to get in on the excitement.
Who said that?
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the Invisible Man.
There had been 3 invisible films since Vincent had made The Invisible Man Returns. The Invisible Woman from 1940, The Invisible Agent from 1942, and The Invisible Man's Revenge, 1944, all from Universal. Abbott and Costello would go on to make a proper Invisible Man entry in their famed monster series in 1951 in Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. Vincent's next part after Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein would place him once again in the bad guy role in the 1948 musical Up in Central Park. Based on the play of the same name, the film is set in 1870s New York. An aspiring young singer named Rosie Moore, played by Deanna Durbin, and her father Timothy Moore, played by Albert Sharp, arrive in New York by steamliner to start a new life. They are immediately met by Mr. Rogan, played by Tom Powers, an employee of the crooked boss Tweed, Vincent Price, who is rounding up immigrants and taking them to voting polls to place illegal votes in the name of deceased Americans. Tweed is the mastermind behind an elaborate political scheme swindling millions from the city of New York. Timothy, being an immigrant, doesn't know any better and goes along with Rogan, and in fact places 23 votes for the Democratic Party, for which he is paid the pricely sum of $50 per vote.
As soon as possible, we must appoint a park superintendent. We must find a man who is loyal and who will follow orders, and is too stupid to question anything that goes on.
Boss Tweed hears of Timothy's efforts, and since he's in need of someone gullible to serve as park superintendent, Tweed offers the job to Timothy.
How would you like to be superintendent of Central Park at a salary of $3,000 a year with living accommodations in the park?
You wouldn't be pulling me leg, Your Honor, would you?
Position is yours, sir. Here's my hand on it. And congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Moore. Congratulations, Mr. Moore. Just me.
In the process, he meets Timothy's daughter Rosie and is immediately intrigued. Upon learning she's an aspiring singer, he promises to help her land fame and Broadway success through his connections. Meanwhile, Rosie also meets newspaper columnist John Matthews, played by Dick Hames. John is also immediately smitten with Rosie and tries to win her affections. He also tries to convince her of just how corrupt Boss Tweed is, resulting in a good old-fashioned Hollywood staple, the love triangle. The remainder of the movie concerns John trying to expose Boss Tweed's racket while saving Rosie's dad from his influence, all while trying to win her love. Up in Central Park was directed by William A. Sider for Universal Pictures. It's a pretty straightforward picture, offering few surprises and a lot of singing and dancing, of which I'm personally not a big fan of. Vincent, however, doesn't sing or dance in this picture, despite having proven in earlier movies that he is more than capable of carrying a tune. Price turns in an entertaining performance as the smirking and scheming Boss Tweed, though he bears little resemblance to the real-life person the part is based on. The real-life Tweed was short, fat, and reportedly embezzled upwards of $50 million from the state of New York before finally being caught and imprisoned. While overall, Up in Central Park is not a bad picture, I recommend this one mainly for Price completists and fans of musicals. After Up in Central Park, Vincent's next film was the 1948 war picture, Rogue's Regiment. Set immediately after World War II, the film opens with a group of Nazi soldiers outside a German bunker burning the bodies of Adolf Hitler and his mistress, Eva Braun. We are then shown news footage of Nazi war criminals being brought to trial by the International Military Tribunal. However, not all the Nazi war criminals were apprehended. One top-ranking official still remains at large, Martin Brunner, third-ranking Nazi official behind Hitler and Himmler. An all-out search for this man continues to bring him to justice, but unfortunately no photos of his face exist by order of the German High Command. The only existing photo of Brunner is one of the back of his head. However, new clues lead the Allies to suspect he has fled to Saigon to join the French Foreign Legion, a common practice among German soldiers wishing to escape notice. Dick Powell plays Whit Corbett, an Allied agent working undercover in the Legion to track down Brunner, who is played by Stephen McNally. He is hiding under the pseudonym Karl Riker. Vincent plays Mark Van Ratten, a German art dealer and Nazi sympathizer. He sends Riker to a tattoo artist who is able to remove the identifying tattoo on his left arm that all SS soldiers bear. However, when the tattoo artist tries to up the agreed upon price, Riker instead shoots and kills the man. Back in the Legion, Corbett continues tracking Brunner's whereabouts, growing increasingly closer to his goal with the assistance of a beautiful cabaret singer and French Secret Service agent Lily Maubert, played by Marta Torrin. Rogue's Regiment was made by Universal Pictures in 1948 and directed by Robert Florey, the director best known for Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Beast with Five Fingers. Robert Florey, by the way, was the director originally slated to direct Frankenstein, with Bela Lugosi in the role as the Frankenstein's monster. Universal, however, instead gave the film to up-and-coming director James Whale and reassigned Florey and Lugosi to Murders in the Rue Morgue. Price puts in a serviceable performance in this film as the conniving Van Ratten, although he spouts what could be possibly the worst accent he ever tried to pull off in a film, right on par with his faux French accent in A Royal Scandal.
You know, it has really become quite a joke among us Saguenay, all you ex-German soldiers enlisting in the Foreign Legion. We call it the Fourth Reich. The French themselves call it Rogue's Regiment.
This is also another of the many films in which Vincent Price dies, killed in a double cross by Brunner after supplying him with a passport out of the country.
I wasn't going to do anything.
No, of course not. You have always admired. So you are protecting me.
Yes, I was. I thought someone might have followed you here. You have to be careful.
I always have been.
Rogue's Regiment is an unusual film plot-wise that offers an odd mix of war and film noir action and tosses in a love interest between Corbett and Marta for good measure. Overall, although it's not one of Price's best films, it's definitely still worth watching, despite Vincent's less than stellar accent. After Rogue's Regiment, Vincent next appeared in the 1948 swashbuckling adventure tale, The Three Musketeers. Based on the famous novel by André Dumas, our story begins in the year 1625 in the village of Gascogne, where young adventurer D'Artagnan, played by Gene Kelly, is setting out to make his way in the world. Armed with his father's sword and letter of recommendation to the Musketeers, D'Artagnan is advised to accept no insult from any man. He takes this advice to heart, as he immediately runs afoul of the escorts for Milady de Winter, played by Lana Turner. He challenges her head henchman to a duel, but before the battle can commence, he is struck from behind and knocked unconscious, and robbed. Once he arrives in Paris, the young hothead quickly runs afoul of all three of the famed Musketeers. Athos, played by Van Heflin, Porthos, played by Gig Young, and Aramis, played by Robert Coote, scheduling duels with all three in the same afternoon to settle their differences. However, when they meet at the appointed time, their duel is interrupted by a troop of First Minister Richelieu's guards, who attempt to arrest all four men on the grounds that dueling is illegal. A battle ensues, and the Musketeers are impressed with young D'Artagnan's bravery and fighting prowess, and forego their duels and take him under their wing. First Minister Richelieu, whose men were just trounced thoroughly, is played by Vincent Price. He is ever scheming and plotting for political power and control. Later that evening, D'Artagnan saves his landlord's goddaughter Constance, played by June Allison, from an attack from Richelieu's men. Turns out she is a maid and trusted confidant of the Queen, played by Angela Lansbury. She is also helping protect the secret that the Queen is having an illicit affair with the Duke of Buckingham, Prime Minister of England, played by John Sutton, and has given a set of 12 studded diamonds to the Duke as a keepsake.
I shall treasure these as I treasure my dearest recollections of you, Anne. As I treasure the anticipation of our next meeting.
The problem is that Richelieu has arranged a banquet where the Queen's jewels are expected to be displayed, and if they aren't there, the Queen's affair could be exposed and the threat of war between their countries a real possibility. Constance asks for D'Artagnan's help in retrieving the jewels before the banquet. D'Artagnan agrees, and upon hearing of his plight, his fellow musketeers decide to join him.
It's all for one, D'Artagnan, and one for all.
And from there, the adventure begins in earnest, full of sword fights, romance, and court intrigue. The Three Musketeers was directed by George Sidney, who was very familiar with leading actor Gene Kelly, having previously directed him in 4 pictures, 3 of them musicals. Made by MGM in 1948, this was the first color adaptation of the André Dumas source material. Gene Kelly, of course, is best remembered nowadays as a dancer and choreographer, and his best known film is, arguably, Singing in the Rain, which was made 4 years after this picture. His dancing experience is put to good use in this film, as the elaborate fight sequences are well choreographed, and Kelly's athleticism and agility are put on display through a variety of flipping, leaping, and jumping moves throughout the film. Vincent Price is excellent as the ominous Richelieu. My only complaint is that I wish he had a bigger role in the film. He only appears a few times in brief scenes with very little to do throughout the film. However, he positively oozes menace in the few scenes that he's allotted. Oddly, in this version, he isn't a cardinal, however, as in the book, but rather First Minister of France. MGM changed his title, dropping the cardinal for fear of upsetting Catholic viewers. Vincent would go on to reprise this role in the 1960 made-for-TV version of The Three Musketeers in the Family Classics series. In that version, however, his religious title would be fully restored and he would once again be Cardinal Richelieu. Overall, the tone of this film is a bit uneven, frequently flipping back and forth between camp comedy and serious drama. The plot is overlong and complicated, as is the runtime, clocking in at over 2 hours. Three Musketeers is a film that, quite honestly, can't decide what it wants to be, action or comedy, and the end result is a bit of a sprawling mess. It's still worth watching, however, for Vincent's scenes and the excellent fight sequences. Vincent's next film after The Three Musketeers was the 1949 black and white film noir, The Bribe. The story begins on a small island off the coast of Central America where an undercover federal agent named Rigby, played by Robert Taylor, is watching an approaching storm from his hotel window, reminiscing about the events leading up to that point. The story is told in flashback with voiceover by Rigby, classic film noir style. Rigby was sent to the island on assignment to pose as a fisherman while investigating a war surplus racket selling stolen airplane motors. Police have narrowed the search to 2 suspects, Tugwell Hinton and his wife Elizabeth Hinton. On the airplane ride to the island, Rigby meets a man named Carwood, played by Vincent Price, and the two hit it off. Rigby, staying in character, tells Carwood he should try fishing on the island sometime. Once he arrives, Rigby finds the island preparing for a big celebration. That evening at a club called Pedro's, Rigby finds the first suspect on his list, Elizabeth Hinton, played by Ava Gardner, who is working as a lounge singer at Pedro's. After the show, Rigby makes his way back to her dressing room. Thinking him just another patron trying to hit on her, she quickly tries to brush him off. While they're talking, her husband Tugwell, played by John Hodiak, enters. He is quite drunk and informs Rigby that Elizabeth is off limits. Tugwell passes out from too much liquor, and Rigby helps Elizabeth carry him home. It is obvious there is chemistry between Rigby and Elizabeth, but she thanks him and sends him on his way. Rigby continues investigating over the next few days, scouting the island from his fishing boat during the day and finding reasons to be around Elizabeth at night. Tugwell is frequently away on business during the evenings, and Rigby is torn between his investigation and his growing attraction to Elizabeth. One evening, Rigby is approached in his hotel lobby by a short, fat man who he had spied several times over the last few days and dubbed the Pie-Shaped Man. This is Beeler, played by Charles Lawton. He informs Rigby that he and his associates know who Rigby really is and why he is on the island, and offers him $10,000 to leave and never come back. Rigby refuses and shortly after runs into Carwood again. While fishing the next day, Rigby hooks a large marlin, and while he and the ship's captain struggle to land the fish, Carwood guns the ship's engine, tossing Rigby overboard into shark-infested waters. The ship's pilot jumps overboard to save Rigby and is attacked and killed. Rigby escapes unharmed, however, and when they get back to the island, Carwood apologizes profusely, explaining that it was all an accident. But Rigby has his doubts. Back at the hotel, Beeler ups his offer to Rigby to $12,000 and throws in the proposal to keep Elizabeth's name out of the deal too, if things somehow go sour for he and his associates. Which brings us back to the present. Rigby is torn between doing his job and possibly incriminating the woman he loves, or accepting Beeler's bribe. It's up to Rigby to determine if Elizabeth is innocent or a deadly femme fatale playing him for a sap. The Bribe was made in 1949 by MGM Studios. It was directed by Robert Z. Leonard and based on a short story by Frederick Nebel. The cast of The Bribe is stellar, especially Charles Laughton, who steals the show as a Weasley, conniving Beeler and becomes somewhat of a sympathetic character by the end of the picture. Price's character, Carwood, on the other hand, has the exact opposite story arc, starting out warm and friendly but revealing himself by the end of the picture to be totally irredeemable. Price puts in a fine performance as the villainous Carwood and pulls off a successful Southern accent, something he had learned to perfect playing character roles over the last decade. This was Vincent's only screen appearance with Laughton, which is a shame as they shared great on-screen chemistry. The finale of The Bribe is spectacular, culminating in a chase scene through a shower of sparks during the island's fiesta. Lensed beautifully by cinematographer Joseph Ruttenberg, who had previously shot Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde starring Spencer Tracy in 1941, this scene is the highlight of the film. It also features yet another dramatic death scene for Price. Overall, The Bribe is a watchable film with an excellent cast and a decent script. Definitely worth tracking down for the fine performances of Price and especially Charles Laughton. Vincent's next picture after The Bribe was the 1949 costume adventure tale, Bagdad. You know, they just don't make them like this anymore. And thank goodness, Bagdad is downright embarrassing, featuring a collection of the whitest of white Hollywood actors, including red-haired Maureen O'Hara and Swiss-born actor Paul Hubschmidt, all playing the part of Middle Easterners, while speaking in English, of course. Returning from a college stint in England, Princess Marjan, played by Maureen O'Hara, discovers her father has been murdered by the creatively named Black Robes, a group of desert renegades who dress in, you guessed it, black robes. She swears revenge upon the robes and seeks to prove that Prince Hassan, played by Paul Hubschmidt, is their leader. However, it is actually his brother Rasul, played by John Sutton, who is the suspected leader, and he is working in league with the wicked Pasha Allah Nadim, played by Vincent Price. In this film, Price's character stomps around with one eye squinted closed, plotting with Prince Rasul one moment, unsuccessfully wooing the princess the next. She, of course, falls for Prince Hassan and decides to help him clear his name and expose Rasul as leader of the Black Robes and her father's killer. Full of sword fights and lots of plotting and scheming, there are also 3 separate songs shoehorned into the film, all sung by Maureen O'Hara. John Sutton, who plays Prince Rasul in this film, would appear in a total of 8 films with Price during the 40s and 50s. Fritz Lieber, who played Rasul's father, the Emir, had also previously worked with Price on The Web. He was the real-life father to famous science fiction author Fritz Lieber Jr. Baghdad is, quite frankly, a brightly colored jumble of a film with a confusing plot that's a chore to make it through in one sitting. It was directed by Charles Lamont, who is best remembered for directing the later series of Abbott and Costello films. Price would go on to work with Lamont again in 1951 in Curtain Call at Cactus Creek, a Western. This was the last big screen appearance for Price in the 1940s. Not exactly a high note to close the decade on. Price would appear in one more project in the 1940s, however, in a made-for-television short film adaptation of A Christmas Carol, with Price performing as the narrator of this Charles Dickens classic. Turns out this was a herald of things to come, as Price would find steady employment throughout the 1950s in the burgeoning new field of television, appearing in numerous dramas, talk shows, game shows, and made-for-TV movies. In fact, he would make more television appearances in the 1950s than movies. The 1940s were a formative period for Price in many ways. By this point in Price's career, he was becoming a fan favorite, and with good reason. His creative output was prodigious. Throughout the late 30s and early 40s, Price had appeared in a total of 6 Broadway plays, numerous radio appearances, 26 feature films, and 2 television appearances. He had established himself as one of Hollywood's up-and-coming young actors and found his true calling playing the villain. Off-screen, he was becoming almost as equally well known for his support of the arts and, in fact, even owned his own art gallery at one point. On a personal front, the 40s were an up-and-down period for Price. He married Edith Barrett in 1938 and they had a son, Vincent Barrett Price, born August 30th, 1940. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last and Vincent and Edith were divorced in 1948. A year later, in 1949, Vincent remarried costume designer Mary Grant. In many ways, they were a better fit and shared many common interests, including a love of fine arts. With a positive new marriage and promising career, things were looking up for Price. The next decade would see his rise to true box office star, as well as his first appearance in the genre in which his name would become synonymous, horror. Be sure and join me back here for more of the fantastic films of Vincent Price, where we'll be taking a look at his films of the 1950s.